Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, February 4th. It's 8:06, and we're going to start the curriculum committee meeting. We're going to just go around the table and introduce ourselves. I am Erin Doug, school board member.
I'm Connie Schmidt, school board member.
Jennifer Boyer, assistant in curriculum. Heidi Spinola, leadership coordinator.
Tina Van Root, district data and assessment.
Dr. Jill Reese, Director of Elementary Education.
Laura Jasmine, assistant superintendent of teaching and learning. Joining us remotely today are Haley Jordan and Kate Caldwell, and they are joining us for the first item on the agenda. Good morning, Kate.
Morning.
Thank you.
Okay, so Laura, you can lead us off on the first? Okay.
Thank you. So the first topic on our agenda today is a new anthology for our mythology class. The mythology class that we have at the high school is an elective offering that students in grades 11 and 12 are able to take. This year we have 5 sections of the class running, and between first semester and second semester. Kate Caldwell and Haley Doherty are our teachers of that class. In that class, they cover Greek mythology, Norse mythology, modern mythology or science fiction, and Egyptian mythology. Am I missing one?
Roman mythology.
Okay, thank you. And so the anthology that they use is aged and worn. And we've certainly gotten our use out of that anthology. And it is, we need a new one. Our teachers have connected with educators in other districts and have looked at some copies of materials. And we would like to purchase this as a primary resource. Haley and Kate, would you like to comment on the text, the Edith Hamilton text at all?
So the text that you have in front of you that we're looking to adopt is actually the same text that we have been using in the district for as long as I have been teaching here, which was 19 years. It's just the 75th anniversary edition of it. So it is word for word the exact same text that we have been using. It's just basically a prettier version of it. This version of it is newer, nicer. It has nice bold headings. It has big color pictures to it. It's much thicker and heavier, and it will wear its hair better than the copies that we have now. In the district, since I've been teaching this class, which I've been teaching mythology for 18 years, we have always used the Edith Hamilton book, but we have used various versions of it, some hardcover, some softcover, and they are falling apart and worn. They are, the covers are tearing, they are all missing pages, and I went through the process last year when we said we needed new books. I contacted all of the school districts I could find in our area that teach a mythology course or any type of mythology course, and contacted the teachers that actually teach those courses to see which books that they used. And most of them either used this book or they used a book that was significantly more difficult than this one. And so we decided that it would be best for our students, given the fact that our mythology course caters to students who are AP level down to very struggling readers, that we needed a textbook that would be accessible to all of those students. And that's why we decided that this one, sticking with this one would be the best. We just wanted to help get the
Go ahead.
Is this, I know it's an elective English course, does it apply towards the current English requirement for graduation?
Okay, so I'm just gonna repeat, could you guys hear, Ms. Schmidt? She asked if it meets graduation, if this meets one of the graduation requirements for English, and it does. At that level, you can take an elective, and it does meet the requirement for English credits.
It's just a semester.
It's just a semester, so it's a half a credit of the 4 required.
And what kind of participation do we have every year in this class? How many students?
So we have around 140 students in it now, this year. And then, Kate, is that pretty typical over the years?
It really depends on the year. We have had as many as maybe 8 sections, 9 sections of mythology, depending on the year. So it's a semester course, so, it'll be half and half. And then we've had as little as,
It's been at least 5 since I've been at Untitled Chapter.
yeah, I think 5 is maybe the lowest we've ever had. But depending on the year, I think we've gone up to maybe 8 or 9 sections of it. So it swings wildly depending on the year. And it really, I think, just depends on the kids. We get a lot of kids who love mythology because they love sci-fi and fantasy literature. So it tends to be a very popular course.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it sounds like it's well received, already. Trigger this role play as well.
Do either of you have any other questions?
I don't. I'm excited to take this home this weekend.
So our 2 curriculum committee members are taking a copy with them, and then they'll share with other board members. We'll have a copy at the public library and a copy here for any public members who want to provide comment on it before the board makes a vote on approving it or not. Haley and Kate, any final comments before we wrap up this agenda item? Thank you too for stepping into the meeting today. I appreciate it. It's always good to hear from the people who will be using the textbook with our students. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Okay, so then we'll get that published in the next newsletter, so that people know how to access it. And then it'll be available here, a copy will be available here during business hours up until the 18th, I believe. And then there will be a week period for at the public library as well. Any other questions, comments on that? Well, the next topic on our agenda is our academic progress update. So typically, we give an update on how our student assessments have been, our student assessment results in winter based on the STAR coefficients. And so just to recall, STAR is our universal screener, and our students take that 3 times a year. And Tina Van Root is going to share the STAR results with us and talk a little bit about that. If you have questions, they may be addressed by any of us.
All right, so like Laura said, STAR is our universal screener. We give it in fall, winter, and springtime to all of our students in grades K through 10. The presentation shows which assessment is taken by each grade level. There is an early literacy version, which is the pre-reading assessment that's given to our kindergarten and first grade students. Students in grades 2 through 10 take the reading assessment, and then students in grade 1 through 10 also take STAR Math. For the first time this year, STAR also offers a STAR Algebra or STAR Geometry assessment. So we explored that and had the high school students in Los Corso Lights take and participate in that to see if they could get more course-specific information and screening data. So I'll just go through each of those 3 assessments kind of side by side and show us our results based off of winter last year by assessment and grade level compared to our winter screening results this year. So last year, we had 94% participation for the K-1 early literacy assessment. And overall, between those two grades, 51% of the students were showing proficiency. This year, we had 98% participation and 45% were proficient. This info is further broken down by each grade level, so you can see how kindergarten versus first grade has done. For these grade level tables, you can look at them in two ways. You can look at it straight across and see how kindergarten last year did compared to kindergarten this year. You can also look at the percentages diagonally to see how kindergarten last year performs this year as first graders by looking diagonally downward.
What is the percentage that you hope to achieve at this age? Because both of my boys did, one of my boys did kindergarten twice, one of my boys did first grade twice because they weren't ready to read. And I can't stop them reading now. So, and they're adults. So I think, I love that we're introducing kids to literacy at this age, but I don't like the expectation that, well, they're just automatically ready to read. Because I mean, in older grades, yes, but at this age, my youngest child who did first grade twice because it wasn't ready to read, it was a mistake, I think, we look back just on that.
So if I was to quote Laura, her answer would be 100%, right? We always want all our kids doing the best on everything. But I think what's important to know is that this assessment is just one set of information. We do other assessments too that are such as like an F&P assessment where we see what reading level students are at and how they progress throughout the year with those. We also do a custom early literacy assessment for kindergarten and first grade, which really looks at each component of early literacy, such as recognition of uppercase letters, recognition of lowercase letters. So it takes this universal screening info and gives us high level, how are they doing? And then we have other assessments that we do in the classrooms that get into the details of what they're doing. This isn't going to be what we make our decisions on. We look at all different data to see how can we help the kids individually and how are we doing as a grade level or as two grade levels in this case to see is there anything else wide span we can do to help before we drill into what the individual student needs.
And to add to your comment a little bit, we do look at the developmental progression for students because when you look within the range of what's typically developing, there's a range there. Not every kid is in the same spot at the moment, but and that's also why we look at early literacy, and then we look at reading and further more advanced literacy. So you're looking at some of those early skills.
Yeah, I guess I kind of have a little personal beef about, there are kids that are really smart and they just aren't ready. And I don't want them getting pegged into a category at such a young age, because I think that doesn't help things.
Yeah, exactly. And when you look at generalized results, you're not looking at the independent level or to the individual child. And that's where the classroom teacher with all of the other information and their observational data can do that and use pedagogical precision to give each child what they need for where they are developmentally.
I just want to make sure we're not setting expectations to a kid and making them think that there's something wrong with them just because they're not ready right now.
No. I'm in a similar boat. I'm a parent here too, and I've got a kid whose school is a breeze for him, and I've got another one where it's a lot of hard work. And ever since he's been in the district, we've been using these assessment practices too, and all it does is give more information so they can target what he needs.
Well, this child that did first grade twice because he wasn't ready to read, he got 33 on the ACT. So it's not that school was hard for him, he just wasn't ready.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge distinction to me. And especially for boys, they need to do other things in kindergarten and first grade. So that they are capable of sitting and reading when they're ready to do that. So I just don't,
I appreciate those observations.
when you say you want 100% on this, to me, that's targeting the wrong thing. That's, yeah, are they ready or are they not ready? And if they're not, I don't want to shame young boys into thinking they're supposed to be ready for something that they're not. Because it doesn't mean that they're not smart.
So I think you bring up a good point, and I'm sorry I missed part of that, but I do think when we get down to D, the early reading empowerment, some of that will speak to what you're concerned about as we help to increase teachers' knowledge in some of this.
And just another anecdote, since we're on the subject, and I think it's relevant here. I've been going to Norway for 5 years. My family's there, my best friends are there. And when I shared with them that my kids, when they're at this age, they were struggling with reading, they're like, so that's okay. And Norway kicks our butt with education. I'm not afraid to say that. And these same kids that aren't ready to read until maybe second grade, they're reading fluently in 2 languages by 6th grade. So I need it to be clear that I don't care if a kid's not ready to read in kindergarten or first grade. They need to be on the playground, socializing with their friends and learning how to get along, not having something drilled into them that they're not ready for, because that makes them feel like they're not smart, when they very likely are just in something else. And I get why we go younger, but starting younger doesn't necessarily feel better.
All right.
But I like the information. I still want the information. But I'm just not, and the decline's important too, but some things I don't care if they're not.
All right, I'm going to move on to the next assessment, which is our STAR Reading Universal Screener. Grades 2 through 10 participate in this. Last year, the test participation rate was 92%. This year was 95%, and last year to this year is identical results of 45% proficient. Looking at it by grade level, again, same, you could look at each grade comparing year to year. You could also look diagonally to see how they transition from one grade to the next. Once students get into grade 3, they start participating in the summative state assessments that Wisconsin puts out, such as the Wisconsin Board exam, the ACT Aspire, and then the ACT with writing. Our proficiency benchmarks are set to align closely to those Wisconsin Board results. So we can use this information at the classroom and grade level. We can also use it as a predictor of how we might do on those spring summative state assessments as well.
These older grades, I do not see.
Any questions with this?
Not really, I guess just the thing of note, I prefer to look diagonally personally, and one of the bigger drop-offs is between 8th grade and high school. The 8th grader turning into a 9th grader and it dropped 5%. So that's just,
I don't know why or anything, I'm just, that's stuck out as an observation to know.
All right. The last assessment is the STAR Math. The general STAR Math assessment is given in grades 1 through 8 this year for the first time. So I did re-summarize what we did last year for grades 1 through 8, so we could look comparatively. Both years we had 97% test participation and also identical results for the grade level, so 43% proficient. And then here is the display of grade level or cohort, if you like. Any questions of Sonia? Alright, that is all for the winter universal screening data.
You talked earlier about there being a geometry version and the algebra
Yes.
version. Were those given to kids this year?
Yes,
And it was by grade level or by what class they were in?
what class they were in.
Okay.
So any student that was in algebra or algebra 2, that's the 9th and 10th grader, was programmed in that system to take stat algebra. We also have an algebra A and an algebra B at the high school, so they could take that as well. Geometry was assigned to the geometry class. And then any 9th and 10th graders that are in a different math still completed this general STAR math assessment.
Okay. So those students that were in, let's say, geometry, they didn't take 2 different STAR assessments.
Correct.
They just took
They
the
just did geometry assessment.
Sorry. Go to the next slide.
Okay. We're gonna move on, right, to,
Thank you, Tina.
thank you, to see, 5th through 8th grade social studies.
So we've been working hard on 5th through 8th grade social studies. So I have a few slides I'm going to go through, and then we actually have a few pages of feedback that we've taken from community stakeholders and people who wanted to look at the resources. So we can go through some of that too.
Okay.
And then we can kind of see where you guys stand and what next steps we want to take.
So, if you,
If you want to advance slides, that would be just fine. I don't know how to do this slide. Okay.
you can just use the arrow keys to go there.
All right. So in this presentation, it's just a few slides. We're going to do an update of the current status of where we are. We were going to talk a little bit about priority standards, but we're going to table that, and I'll talk to you a little bit about why, and then the next steps to move forward. So our current structure of intermediate school and middle school provides an opportunity for those teachers to teach wholly owned social studies courses. And so it's different in K-4, where it's part of kind of a whole series of different curriculums. They actually have documented social studies courses at those grade levels. So it gives students an opportunity to take those courses like in progression. And one of the things that we've talked about with teachers is really how can we vertically align that work? So as kids move from elementary into intermediate, middle, and into high school, they have that aligned and vertical information that they need to be great social studies citizens. So over the last couple months, we've been through a series of different processes. And we did come to the board in January and give you also those slides to look at the resources. This is just a little bit more in-depth, and now we actually have feedback on some of it too. So we started it with an RFP process, and we went out in our request for purchase. We contacted and we were contacted by 6 different vendors. We had 5 respond, and we chose 4 to bring in for review. So those 4 vendors came in and sat with all of the social studies teachers from grades 5 through 8 and talked through their resources, talked through the benefits of their programs, all the different things. And those teachers had an opportunity then to put their feedback in and look at what they felt would work best for the vertical alignment of the classes and what they could teach. So they also gave us feedback. We then provided a series of links for open for public and stakeholder review. And so it was a little bit different this year because we didn't have the physical books for people, but we had links for like a panacea of all the materials that each of those companies could offer us. So we had narrowed it down to 2. We put computers with those links at the library for a week. We brought them back to this building for a week. We held a public forum one night for community members or anybody to come in, teachers, whoever, to come in and look and get help going through the links and seeing what was there and those types of things. We also then were open on a Saturday, and then by request by some of the stakeholders, they asked for some more time. So I did open it for, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And the reason why it was available digitally is because you're responding to a request that it be available 24/7 from anywhere. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. And really, I mean, you could sit in your slippers and, at midnight if you wanted and look through the things if that was what you wanted to do. So it was a little bit different, but it offered that opportunity. So thank you.
And that's in direct response to what was requested.
So I did extend it another week based on a request from a couple community members. So I actually extended it until yesterday morning. So we were kind of right at the end of the cycle before this meeting. And so then I took the feedback that we received over those last couple of weeks and put them into a form that we can kind of look at. There was a Google form that they filled out. And if they put that in the form, then we could go into it and I could put investigations and, any feedback or comments that we could help them with right next to it. So that's what I put together last night. So those things. We will show also, though, importantly, we had a link on our website, and this gets into the 24/7 piece where anybody from the community could just go on that link and see how to access things, and they could go in and look at them. So it gave a really wide open scope. So that was kind of nice.
Yeah, it was, that's how I got it there too, so I appreciate that.
So we did do this draft of social studies standards. I'm not going to get too much into them because I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going to happen with them. So we did some priority work with social studies standards, and the teachers have started to vet them and go through them. I did share them at the public forum also, but as we bring in the new resources and tools, hopefully, then we're going to go back into those standards and develop assessments and things like that. When that happens, we will bring those materials forward to the board, and any standards that we change or update will come to the board in July as part of that regular adoption when you approve standards for the year. So we're kind of in process of that, but we're not quite ready to bring that forward yet because it's kind of a chicken or egg thing. Is it the curriculum first? Is it the standards first? And how do we combine those things together? So we're working through that, but we will bring forward what we have once, it's the first meeting in July. I don't think it's July 1, but whatever that July meeting is. Okay. Yeah.
I have a question about the process for selecting the publishers. I know you said you did the RFP for 6 vendors, you said?
Yes.
Put out there the response.
And the response was 6. So you put it out to everybody. You
So
say, hey, we're a district that's looking for social studies.
Yeah.
Bugs is early. And that's what the response was. Okay.
So we put it out, and then we also reached out. So the interesting thing with publishers is these big publishing houses have started to buy up some of these smaller ones. So it's become a smaller and smaller market in terms of textbooks, right? But we put it out publicly so anybody can respond to it. But we also then, like I knew specifically, there's these big 4 or 5 vendors that have an aligned piece, and that was my thing. Like if we're gonna get aligned, we have to have companies respond that can show us that they're aligned through those grades.
And you mean, when you say alignment, you mean with, vertically throughout all the grades?
Yeah.
We're not just cherry picking
Right.
things here and there.
Yeah. So one of the concerns, honestly, that I had too is we don't have a purchased curriculum right now for K-4 social studies. And I wanted to make sure that if we go that route down the road, we have something that can also align with that on the back end too. So that was one of the concerns that I just had. That wasn't specifically written in the RFP, but I was thinking about that as we went through and reached out to vendors. So we reached out to some vendors we knew that had those products, and then we also just put it out there for anybody to respond.
And then when you talk about having, I think you said 4 vendors that ultimately came in to
Yeah.
present the materials, were all 5th through 8th grade social studies teachers invited to that, or were a select or committee formed, or how would that work?
Yeah, all of them were invited.
Okay.
Not all of them attended, but
Sure.
all of them from Silverbrook and Badger were invited.
Okay.
So I kind of went through this, but this is just a layout of when the materials were available. These were the 2 vendors that we brought forward. So the 2 vendors of that group we brought forward, and this was based on teachers then went through, the teachers actually met a couple of times in their grade level teams and so on, and then I brought them back together again too. They put feedback in a form for them to tell me kind of what their top vendors were. And so these were their top 2, and so we brought their top 2 forward for the public forums and public review and all of that. So it was Savas and Mcgraw-Hill. So this again is the timeline. Potentially we're looking at doing this review, and it's kind of compact. So we did the review, we went through the RFP, we're looking at bringing this forward to then the full board for discussion and for possible action, but that timeline can be subject to change also, but this was originally what we put forward to get this work done. And then some people like this visual timeline, so this is just another version of that timeline, but it kind of just goes through the dates and looking at different formats. I would like to get into a little bit of the feedback. I'm a little bit worried it's going to be small. So,
If you want, if you can click on your links.
okay, so a couple things about the feedback. So there was a lot of feedback from a very small but stealth group of people, right? And so they put their heart and soul into this feedback and spent a lot of time going through the resources. And I don't know if it was better for them. They would probably say it was to have those links at home. I think it was, but also then they spent a lot of time going into it, which is super helpful for us. So I want to say that I appreciate their feedback. I appreciate the time and effort they put into it. Some of the feedback, just so you know, was not specific enough to give me opportunity to go into the resources and look into it further. If a page number wasn't listed or a book wasn't listed, I had a hard time going back to the resources and saying this is what it is. So the things that had page numbers, I went into and looked at. I attached some screenshots. I put some specific quotes and things in from the books. Things that didn't have page numbers or specific books, I put in the form. They're still in the form as is in the raw state, but I was not able to necessarily give a specific response or investigation or further information about that. So we can continue to develop that further. It's just, it was tricky to do that without some of that information.
So what you're saying is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, these people, if we look at their comments and determine that there's not clarity with where they're exactly talking about. They still have the links available so they can come back and clarify that and we can have that information. They can still provide that to us if we point out that this isn't
We certainly
clear
could.
enough. Okay,
Yeah, we certainly could. And I have attached, so there were a couple letters that were written and things like that, so I attached those in here. So you have those. And then, I'm gonna open this Mcgraw-Hill one. So there was significantly more feedback around Mcgraw-Hill than there was Savas. And so we'll start with that. Like I said, Well, can you move that?
Yep.
So if you look where I'm clicking right now, that's the raw feedback section where it says feedback comments. And then if you scroll over to the right, those are some of the areas that I was able to further investigate. And so with that further investigation, I was able to put in some specific information. At one point, I contacted Mcgraw-Hill about some of the information. So one of the things, I'll just give you an example. In that first box, there were some page numbers in there, so that was super exciting. So I was able to go into that one and give some specific investigation. The first one pointed out a concern about SEL in the Mcgraw-Hill text. And so I did reach out to Mcgraw-Hill because that came up a couple times. And I also did go into the resources and look and see where it was located. So there we go. So in the Mcgraw-Hill teacher resource, in some of the different units, there's call out boxes that are small, and I put a screenshot in a folder for people that I can share also. But there's call out boxes in some of the teacher lesson plans that say, here's an area where you could infuse these SEL strategies. It's not in every lesson, it's not in every chapter, and it's a suggestion. And so one of the things that we would say is we don't want teachers doing that because we have an adopted SEL curriculum. So it's small and it's sort of inconsequential enough because we have an adopted curriculum, they don't need to use that. And we would tell them that any place that's listed, we don't need to use that. We have an adopted SEL curriculum that we use in our SEL work goes through that adopted curriculum. Do you guys have questions about that?
I do like the page numbers, and we just got this in, so I would need to go back to cross-reference it with the pages that they're talking about. They weren't really comments of there.
And you did some of that work off to the side,
I do too.
if the patient was
Yeah.
called up.
So if you look at, Laura, if you can just go back over to the right-hand side. So I tried to respond where there was page numbers and put the page number in and then the investigation on that page number. You know, there were a couple things like at the bottom, I think the page number was wrong, and that's not a big deal. We can always fix that if we get the correct page number, but I wasn't able to locate anything at that page number, so then we would have to go back into the resources if we need a new page number.
So the public comments are the ones on the left.
Yeah.
And then these are these are your comments?
Yeah,
Okay.
so at the top, if you look at the top, I said like investigation 1, investigation 2, investigation 3, just so I could, if the public comment was listed in like different sections, I tried to correspond with those sections.
Okay, like you're responding to the concern that
There was
you only
SEL.
mentioned one, okay, that one, but then also the Boston Massacre, the
Yeah, and so that one, so I'm just looking at, hold on. So I was able to get into The ones that had, like 118 had a page number, 132 was a page number. The page 485, I was not able to locate, but if someone would want to clarify that for me, I could always go back into that again. It's just, I was not able to locate that. So I just indicated that as I was going through it. Does that make sense? Or do you have questions about that?
Yeah, I'll just,
We tend to look at it.
yeah.
And so it's good, you can see how it's grouped within the spots.
Okay.
And then if there was, some, if, Dr. Reese took a closer look at something.
Okay.
You have that screenshots.
I did do some screenshots, yeah.
Yeah, just so we can,
And the screenshots should help if you're gonna go into the text so you can kind of see. One of the things I was wondering, because we had a really tight timeline, is we're set to bring this forward on Monday, right? And so I'm thinking that if I'm hearing you guys say you want to go into the feedback further, if you need to adjust any of that.
I mean, I think because, and you can disagree with me, but this was such a tight turnaround, I want to be able to dig in it a little bit more. I didn't see the feedback, and when we went through this process with social emotional learning, we were able to see the feedback and then be able to dig into it more. So
and there was a lot less, to cover, ground to cover with social emotional learning too. So it was nice to be able to go through and address specifically every single concern.
I would like some more time.
Yeah, I mean, people took the time to
Yeah,
read this
so
and
I'd
make
be able to
comments. I
invest
don't
the
wanna,
time too.
yeah, I don't wanna, like, thanks and move on. I wanna really dig into those.
Yeah. So would you like to change some of the dates in the timeline?
I mean, I would like to revisit this at the March curriculum meeting
Okay.
where Tanya and I can have some, have a month or so to look at the feedback and be able to respond to it more, in a more educated way.
So then, if we do that, we'll push these, then the board meetings to March instead of February. Are you okay with that?
I would prefer that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't wanna rush it. I think it's too important. I don't wanna just move along for the sake of moving along.
I don't know what the March board meeting calendar looks like, but I'm assuming there'll be a meeting shortly after our next curriculum one, so.
We can take a look. Jennifer, can you just, pull up the calendar that tells the sequence of the board and the curriculum committee? I can't remember if it's March or May, where the first board meeting of the month is actually before the first.
Okay.
Okay,
But I just don't, or these curriculum meetings, and it doesn't mean we can't readjust the curriculum committee if we need to, but I'd like to maybe comment on that now. Thank you, Jennifer.
So just while she's going through that, we have, the form is set the same way for Savas also. Like I said, there's quite a bit less feedback on Savas than there is on Mcgraw-Hill. Sure. But the form is set up the same way, so it's the feedback from the stakeholders and then the investigations that I was able to do to correspond with it. And again, with that, if there are page numbers, I was able to do it. Some of the information, because there weren't page numbers or books listed, I wasn't able to get in depth with, but we can certainly look at that even further. So that's the feedback comments, and then to the right again is where I was able to do some investigation.
What is the date of the March curriculum committee?
It's the first,
1st of March, okay.
and then the board meeting's on the 7th and 21st.
Oh, okay.
I feel like that would fall well then. Thank you, Jen.
So would you like to then, we can close this out for today and then you can spend some time looking into it further and then we can come back in March, is that what you're thinking? Okay. If you need anything from me in terms of getting into the curriculum resources, please let me know in terms of the tools or links or anything like that. Over the course of the next 4 weeks, reference what happens, please let me know. Okay?
Thank you.
Anything else for the next one then too?
So this is a combined effort with
Okay.
Mr. Hanson and I.
Okay.
So I think, are you starting us out, Mr. Hanson?
Sure.
Okay. Very exciting.
So, do you recall, only a few months in when the pandemic started, we also approved new certified staff compensation model. And that compensation model is very much focused on compensating employees who acquire expertise in targeted areas that really benefit, our specific district school goals, areas of focus, gap areas we want to get after. So that compensation model was approved at that time. We've been able to offer a menu of options to staff, but our goal really has been to significantly expand those options. We want to be able to touch on all the different areas across all the grade levels, all the content areas, which our current offerings do, but we want to do that in a more expansive way, as well as a way that really targets those critical goal areas. So, earlier you saw Tina and Jill and Laura talk about our STAR results around literacy. And this plan that we have talked to you today about is very much targeted at that early literacy support and intervention. So I'm going to let Jill talk about, as we go through more the curricular side and what the benefits of this program are, but we are really looking at this as an opportunity to both empower our current leaders who have some of the training that we're going to talk about already, and how they can be instructors to our other staff to spread this expertise throughout the system. And I think what's really exciting about this is this plan is taking an expertise that historically throughout education has been viewed as used in a narrow environment very commonly, only in maybe reading intervention or something like that. But what we found is that the research around it is so strong and so been researched for so many decades that really there's great value in bringing this to the regular classroom environment. And that's what we're going to be working to do here. It will involve a significant, investment in energy from staff members that choose to participate, but that will be matched with a significant result in terms of the impact it can make on students, as well as how it can positively impact their compensation for choosing to take that journey and make that investment of time and energy. So that's what we're here to talk about today.
Thank you. So ERE stands for Early Reading Empowerment. And just to give you a little bit of background on it, and I will have Heidi join in if I miss anything, but early reading empowerment has been around since the 90s. It stems from a body of research called reading recovery, which was developed by somebody named Mari Clay. And Mari Clay developed that years ago, in terms of helping students increase early literacy skills and helping instructors know how to do that work with students. So in the 90s then, from her reading recovery research, this early reading empowerment programming was developed. You actually can go to UW-Milwaukee and take courses in early reading empowerment and get a certification. So we're offering a version of that for our teachers here in the district. The target audience for this is our kindergarten through 4th grade teachers, and we have sort of a rollout plan to kind of hit those teachers at different levels. We also are including our special education teachers in this. Go ahead.
Sorry, as I was reviewing this last night, one of the things that I was trying to get some perspective on is this part of the ongoing professional development that's expected, and this is one of the things they can do, or is this something above and beyond what, that?
So that's a good question. So this is a pretty intensive training, something that you probably really couldn't have achieved during your typical professional development type schedule. So this becomes an option that's heavily incentivized for teachers to be able to acquire. Because as Jill will talk about, I mean, you're talking about a year-long commitment, kind of like every other week, doing some coursework, as well as basically you're implementing it as you learn it with a group of students as well, which is the normal model, whether it's reading recovery or ERE. So it's a pretty big investment of time and energy, and for that reason, we're taking it on in terms of an option, but a heavily incentivized option.
Okay, yeah, because anytime I look at anything that's optional, gotta consider what the cost is and what the impact we can expect is, and why.
We'll talk about kind of how the cost structure works in a little bit, because we're gonna work with one of our partner universities on this too.
And I like that this is on the heels of the STAR report, so we can see that this is, okay, what are we doing about it? Is this part of our response to that?
So I went through a little bit of the background, but this is work with myself, Lenny Hansen, and Heidi Smigola regarding how we can address the literacy scores and support early literacy in the district. And so really, this training that the teachers are going to get is going to give them specific skills and resources for working with individual students and small groups of students to target increasing early literacy skills. So our rollout plan looks like this, and the reason we have to do a rollout plan like this is because each course, there's a series of things that happen in the course where there's some one-on-one from the instructor. There's also some videoing of working with students that the instructor analyzes and things like that. So it's pretty intense. And so the cadre of people in those courses, we have to limit in order to have the instructors be able to help them the most. And so we're limiting it to about 15 to 18 people per year, because it's a year-long course. But we're also inviting special ed teachers to be part of that. So the rollout starts with first grade teachers, intervention, and special ed. One of the things is, since it's a choice, we agreed that if the cohort doesn't fill up, then other people from those other grade levels can join the cohort earlier if they would like to do that. So we're going to be flexible on those cohorts, but we're specifically giving those teachers we have listed amount of time to register and get set up before we invite other people into the cohort.
So we're really fortunate. We have a number of our own literacy specialists and reading interventionists who are kind of a train-the-trainer kind of model, and they're capable of being the instructors on this. If you were to go to UWM and do the certification program, you'd be spending a significantly more money than it's going to cost employees in terms of tuition for us. So you get at a lower price, which is going to make it more attractive, obviously, to staff to go after. But on top of that, they're going to be learning from people that may very well be working in their own building, but certainly work here in the district, which means they're going to get this placed in a context that's very specific to how we do things, right? Whether it's within our literacy framework and how our literacy block is built. It's, versus you just go to a university, they're going to do it in a very broad way that you then have to adapt to the way that your district works. So I think we're, in terms of the applicability, it's going to be really off the charts on how that works. The reason we're targeting kind of that first grade as our initial group is so reading recovery, which this is based on, which is a highly successful, extremely well researched, but also highly expensive program. was kind of initially designed for first grade as kind of that's the ideal spot for reading recovery to school and trying to accelerate student learning in literacy. But as research came out beyond that, then they saw there's benefit outside of first grade as well, like kindergarten, second grade, third grade, special education, regardless of level. So that's why we're going to start in the first grade. There is a strategic reason for that, but really there could be benefit throughout all of elementary levels for us.
So we talked about the why and why we're doing this, and part of it is explaining the why to teaching staff also. And so really it's about an awareness of these practices and an awareness of how they can apply these practices in the classroom. And one of the things that I always go back to as a former principal and having that experience with like literacy specialists also is teachers come into classrooms with 20 or 25 kids that have a spectrum of reading needs, right? And as an elementary teacher, you're getting maybe 3 to 6 credits in literacy when you're finishing your elementary program. And you don't have necessarily that literacy license or that 316 license that gives you kind of some of this knowledge base. This is the kind of thing that helps to grow their toolbox and give them some of those skills to help that spectrum of students. And so I can't, just from my practices, I can't speak highly enough about this work and what an impact this has. So it really helps them grow their internal knowledge base and then apply those skills with their kids in the classroom. Hey, do you want to say anything else about that?
Not at this point, no, good.
Okay.
I think, when being principal in our district and when I was a teacher at an elementary level prior to that, when you knew how many reading recovery slots were available each year, I mean, it was you put tooth and nail to get your students who were maybe struggling a little bit into one of those slots. It was so valuable, right? Because you knew the success rate was so high. Extremely intensive intervention, but with results. What we're doing here is instead of just isolating that to the few kids who can get into a slot with a reading interventionist training this, we're going to spread that capacity now to classroom teachers so they can integrate those practices. So now, instead of being so concerned about these few expensive spots, we're going to have a much wider array of students that now can access probably one of the most well-researched literacy practices in the country in the last 50 years.
So you need to quantify that in the spreadsheet?
Well, I couldn't.
You're asking the right guy.
So, I haven't seen reading recovery bill in a while. So reading recovery is a very immersive experience. So the interventionist delivering it is doing one-on-one reading instruction. So 30 minutes, is it 30?
It's 30 minutes
Yeah.
a day for 5 days a week, for a period of approximately 15 to 18 weeks.
Right. So
It's a built-in 15-minute planning and debrief time immediately following the student lesson to be able to plan a responsive component for the next day. So you're really taking a 45-minute instructional slot for that student.
on top of that, the interventionist receives, I don't know if you call it coaching or consultation with kind of a super specialist from reading recovery itself from the consortium, who then, when you're having kids who are struggling and so forth, you kind of problem solve that with a mega expert in the area. Very intensive, right? Costly, right? Because of all of these supports and because of that one-on-one nature. What they have found, so they took the reading recovery work and then ERE, which is actually a more locally developed offshoot, which is why it's offered at UWM, reading recovery nationwide, took that and said, how can we take some of the best practices here, widen the scope of who can be reached by this to groups, small groups, and still get a bang for the buck. So ERE versus reading recovery is already a financial victory. And then on top of it now, we're not just spreading that to reading interventionists. Now we're talking about classroom teachers who in their normal reading groups and things like that they're having every day can integrate those practices. So, I can't quantify it, and it's gonna be a nice number that I come up with.
Go ahead. You'll recall back when we were looking at, selecting a comprehensive literacy model structure. One of the components when we initially presented the partnership and comprehensive literacy as the place for selecting, one of those components is that you have reading recovery as a process. We had also delved into the cost of that as a district and the essentially the return on investment. And knew at that time that ERE is going to give us even a stronger return on our investment than the current reading recovery practices in the district. We also did not have a trained reading recovery person in each building. And in order to address that, we made sure that we now have our literacy interventionist in every building that is ERE trained or previously was reading recovery trained. And so
At the K-4 level.
correct, at the K-4 level. The model of training your grade level teachers on this has been successfully done in other Wisconsin school districts with recommendation.
So instead of just having teachers here and there that know how to do this, basically everyone's gonna know how to do it. And it can be incorporated throughout the reading instruction and not just pulling kids out and singling them out and.
Correct. The goal would be for them to apply it into their tier 1 instruction in the classroom if they are a classroom teacher. So technically ERE is a 30-minute block, but what you can do is say, my kids need this 10 minutes in guided reading today, so we're gonna do this 10 minutes today. And then tomorrow, we're gonna do that 10 minutes. So you can still get that same type of instruction without needing to be pulled out of the room. And we can still be using that same level of research with all of our students and just, instead of just a few select students who might be pulled out for that type of instruction like we had with reading recovery.
Okay, empowers teachers to do those on-the-fly decisions too, that give you that pedagogical precision to make that difference for that child.
This gets back to a little bit about what you were saying about if a student isn't quite ready to read.
Yeah.
This helps beef up their skills and give them some supports and things like that.
Because one of the, intervention, reading intervention, using research practices has a lot of research behind it that shows it's successful. The downside of kind of the traditional intervention model is the pull-out portion of it, right? So I'm out of class, I'm missing, the other instruction that's going on. And also, is it happening in isolation? Heidi talked about that collaboration between the teacher and interventionist. That's important because otherwise, okay, I learn what I'm doing in intervention, but is it connected to what's going on in class? And if it's not, it doesn't really help me. When we can infuse that into the classroom, because the classroom teacher is delivering that, they're not being pulled out, they're not missing that time that, with their peers and learning the reading instructions, and then they're being taught by someone who is planning the entire core instructions, they know how to integrate it more successfully.
Also, like, just from a little kid's point of view, it's you're not being taken away from your friends and feeling different maybe in some way.
You're not recovering something that you weren't even ready to start in the first place, so you're not starting behind.
Right.
So that's a lot of advantages to doing it this way, and there are other districts in the state that have tried something like this. I don't know of anyone particularly close to us or at least bordering us that's doing something like this, so we're excited to kind of bring this approach to the region.
The closest one is
Those
probably
attitudes about learning, like how these kids look at themselves.
Right.
That gets established early on.
Yeah.
So,
I want to talk about some of the hows, because I love ideas, but I need to know step-by-step process.
So does this, go ahead, I'm sorry.
When we talk about that we have people in our district that can provide this instruction, are those people willing and able to provide this instruction? Time, commitment? like, it's nice to say like, oh, Lenny can do that, but if you haven't talked to Lenny about it and he doesn't have the time for it, that's a different story.
Yeah, so kind of twofold answer there. So first is we've had conversations with our individuals who are trained. Actually, some of them have already been providing that training to other interventionists already in the system. And Heidi has really led the facilitation of expanding that capacity to all our interventionists, so that at least all of them have training in ERE/reading recovery type practices. So the discussions have happened. And then in terms of how do we continue to incentivize, that leadership by them, it's with compensation. So this is where that partner university comes in, and it really works out well for us. So we are going to be partnering with Concordia on this one. They've really been expanding heavily their purview into this realm of micro-credentialing and things like that. And the courses we offer as technically Concordia courses. Now, they're not graduate courses. They're called professional development credit hours, which is actually exactly what we want because they're significantly less expensive. So the investment from the teacher who wants to take the course is $330 for the year. Okay. Our reward that they're going to get, the micro endorsement compensation expertise pay they're going to get, I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit, but we're charging $1,500 as a increase, not just one time, but annual increase to pay for having this expertise. Had we sent them to a UWM, then their graduate level courses, same kind of coursework, but now you're paying a way higher price. So by us doing this through Concordia and partnering with them so that we can provide the instructors, Concordia's like, this is a win for them, right? They kind of don't have to do anything except facilitate enrollment and grades and that sort of thing. We're doing all the other work. We're developing the coursework. We're providing the instructors. So really a win both ways. Lets them keep up their program as well. What that also allows us to do is that tuition piece that anybody who's enrolling is going to pay, that flips around and pays our instructors. So the instructors actually get paid not by the district. They're getting paid by the university primarily through tuition. We have talked about potential additional amount, a small amount for if you are teaching that year, maybe an additional planning amount or something like that, because again, since it's not being paid at that graduate level tuition, the dollar amount they get paid by the university is less. But in general, most of the cost for the trainer is out of our hands. The trainer is being paid by the university through that tuition. And then we compensate on the back end for individuals who complete the training so that they receive the expertise pay. Obviously, any of the trainers would also receive that expertise pay because they're already capable of it, right? They're already trained in it. So they're getting that on top of whatever they get paid every time they teach the course, which is based on a number of students enrolled, which is pretty cool.
Do you, maybe this may be in your spreadsheet, but have projections of how many teachers you think would be interested
I
each
think
year?
we'll fill the cohorts.
Okay.
So the number we're bringing forth, we talked about a $1,500, increase that you receive for this, which 330 is the input, and the output first year is $1,500. And the return on investment is pretty great if you're a teacher, and it's a recurring return, right? And then as years, each year goes by and we review what all of those expertise pays are set at, right? So we've got master's degrees, we've got those licenses, we've got, all these other courses. If we make adjustments on other pieces that, keep up inflation, things like that, this would go up as well, right? So potentially even more would come down the road. Let's say we increase the reading license by X number of dollars. Well, we certainly need this to be below the reading license, because getting that reading license is at least 18 credit type graduate program, right? But we can kind of nudge those along together in an inflationary way. I don't know if I answered your question, but.
And you said that in other districts that do this, even though there aren't any neighboring for us to choose from or compare, that they have increased their, because, yeah, I would want to see this.
improve.
I mean, we talk about a return on investment for teachers financially and time-wise, but what's the ROI on students?
Yes.
And if there's tons of research on just the effectiveness of re-recovering ERE in general. And then the integration into classrooms is probably a more recent element, but that's something that we can probably.
So nearby districts that do this would include Elbro, Sussex Hamilton does this, Waukesha does this. So those are just 3 that are very nearby that have had this practice in place for quite a long time. The first school district to work to move this into classrooms was actually Sussex Hamilton. So they have a trainer within their district that does this. And they have a similar model set up to how we are setting our model up here. And they have seen a huge return on their investment with their scores as a result of that training.
Can you, is it possible for you to pull that up and present it on at the next?
Yeah, we can pull state report card data, that's all
Yeah.
publicly available, right? So we can pull that.
Side by side. And that should note that the state report card data will go down to grade 3.
From practical experience also, our current superintendent and myself were both principals in another district, and we were trained as principals to the district. It was in Waukesha. And I took kids every year to teach them to read through this process. And our school the school that I was principal made huge gains in terms of literacy and writing and reading because of some of this work. So,
Okay, good. So, it's nice to have that.
Yeah.
On the ground perspective, not just the real. As much as I ask for data, I still like to verify it with real life.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, if you talk to any of our elementary teachers, particularly like our first grade, second grade, kindergarten level, and ask them about reading recovery, they're going to rate about 11 down. They know that those practices work.
So this page is kind of the FAQ page, and I think Mr. Hanson went through a lot of this. Is there anything else on here that we need to mention?
I don't think so. We're just excited about our own people being instructors. We started down that path on like our technology course, for example, one of our instructional coaches and our director of technology, the instructors, and just you've taken courses before when it's taught by someone who's not in your context and how difficult it is to apply that to what you do. This is by our people who know our systems. I just think we can do significantly better than your average training or certification you can get just going to any other university.
It is important to note, though, that once a classroom teacher is trained, at this point, that would not qualify them to be a trainer. We have had extensive conversations around only the members who have been university trained or have taken the full reading recovery training would be our trainers. As someone who has been a part of those processes, those are very, very in-depth experiences. It's a lot of rigor, it's a lot of time. And so that depth of learning that you get through the university is similar, but at a slightly higher rigor than what you will do here within the district, simply because we want teachers to be able to apply it to their classroom and not have to be able to apply it solely to a pull-out intervention type structure, which is how the university teaches it. So that's important to note, that once you are a trained teacher, it doesn't mean you are automatically then a trainer.
That's good, that's a good distinction.
So this slide just really goes through the course details and what's involved in those 2 items. And we've listed in here course and courses. It's really a full year. So you could look at it as 1 full year of a course, or it's 2 semesters. So there's a couple different things that happen in each of those semesters, but it takes a full year to go through that.
And really the split is due to just how university gets calculated.
And the last slide is just to show kind of district alignment with all the different things we have going on and to align to the literacy work we're doing, the new resources we're bringing in, the STAR results, and just alignment of all those things across the district. So this is another sort of leg to that stool, I call it, or another piece in that puzzle, because this is really important in terms of that building early literacy.
And I just want to thank, Heidi and Jill and Laura, this is the kind of collaboration from the operations side, the learning side, that when we can make it happen like this and ways like this, like it really yields positive results. So we're really excited about what this leads into and opportunities and how it gets other people's minds thinking about how can we continue to really push gaining expertise in all areas, because that's what the district values. And if we want to have the best trained, most equipped, most experienced people to meet the needs of kids, and that's what's been making. So I want to thank Heidi and Jill and Laura for coming to me, bringing this forward. As in my principal time, we have some recovery going on in our building. My school saw lots of incredible gains in the area of literacy, and I believe in this work and what the impact this is going to make.
I know that at Delta Defense, when we invest in our people, they feel valued and they respond to the great performance. So I think it is a good investment.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that want to grow, and this is such an opportunity to do that. Meanwhile, growing their students, and this is touching all students, and we know those elementary school classes especially have such a range of readers, and to be able to, probably even especially right now after COVID and how it's affected students' learning, to be able to touch all students, and I'm excited about that.
So I think our timeline plan is on Mondays for the week. We will be taking this up for discussion so that the rest of the board can learn about it, to hopefully point towards a recommendation for approval at the second meeting.
Next on, course review process of health and growth development.
So, we have mentioned a number of times that we need to come back and review our health and courses and our career growth and development units. And today I want to just talk about the 7-12 health and class. So our health and physical fitness education is 7 and 12. And we're going to do a course review of our current health and wellness course. And from that review, they will make some recommendations. We've been getting feedback along the way. Over the last couple of years, we've had several meetings and we've had some discussions with that group as well as with community members who have provided specific feedback. We're going to take a close look at the health course. Separately, we'll look at human growth and development. And so at our March 1st meeting, we'll take a look at that timeline. Human growth and development, when we look at that, we're also going to ask the board to appoint an advisory. And so we'll go into the detail on that at the March 1st committee meeting, because the board needs to appoint an advisory committee. We'd like that advisory committee to be coming together in April. That gives us time to really do that review of the health course. A couple of questions about that is, the state requires our students to have half credit of health taken sometime between middle and high school. You have to complete a half credit by the time you graduate. And it allows the course to be taken in middle school and count for that high school graduation credit. The question is, does that really meet the student's needs for to have a deep understanding of health and wellness practices, to do that at a young age when they're going through so much change and experiencing so much change? And that's really what the health committee has to review all the feedback. Or the 7-12 health teachers will review that feedback that has been provided over time. Then we'll seek additional feedback based on the whatever recommendations they come forward with. So this timeline just kind of is really for broad information, because the detail will come back after we've done some exploration. And specifically, human growth and development will be separated out from course sequence. If the recommendation were to remain with one health course, then that, the human growth and development unit within there will go with that advisory committee. If the recommendation were to be to separate that out, then we'd be looking at, when we look at human growth and development, it would be fourth, fifth, and then two other courses that an advisory committee would be taking a look at. So we've got some work to do before that advisory committee comes together.
Okay, yeah, I would like to see, the comparison of what we have now and what you're proposing. I like that, that you're considering, if you're teaching this stuff earlier. I think that's a great thing to explore. But when we do offer some health in middle school, so I guess I'm confused, and maybe when you, as you're putting this together, be sure that your presentation, is clear for that question. Which I would think that that's gonna be common for the people at home.
Absolutely.
Want to know that too. So.
Some districts do if you're in a traditional middle school model and you have 6 through 8, you have a portion of health in 6th grade, a portion of health in 7th grade. And then your 8th grade health is what your high school health is.
Okay,
And we do it all in one.
okay,
So we don't teach a separate course in 7th grade or 6th grade for health, like 6th grade does to look for drugs. And we did that a number of years ago.
and
But there's not a specific health course for 7th grade. They, in 8th grade, take the high school course or wait till high school to take it. And that's really what the question we have to answer, what best serves our students to prepare them for life after high school.
And noting again that health is different than human growth and development. Those are two different things.
Correct.
That's gonna need to be extra clear as well as you're putting this together.
Because when that advisory team meets, we'll be looking at the 4th grade human growth and development, 3 lessons there.
Okay.
The 5th grade, 3 lessons there in human growth and development, and currently a unit in this health class.
Okay.
And so
So
that
this
will be
is the
separate.
health class, and then just this 14-day deal here is the human growth and development. And then the 4th and 5th grade, if I recall, thank you, Zach. I remember going to those
Yeah.
with my kids.
So
Okay.
during the last 2 years, it's been a little different because 1 year we were shut down.
Sure,
And
yeah.
the other year, we weren't really having people into the building. So, but we've always done a parent preview night, and where parents can come in and watch all of the videos.
Okay.
That's going to be coming up, and that'll be communicated out by the site principals, that parent preview atmosphere. And however, we did do it differently when we didn't do it remotely.
Sure.
So parents will be able to come in, still do the preview, and then the lessons, when we do the lessons in 4th and 5th grade, a healthcare professional is actually coming in to do those lessons.
Yeah, I think I remember that as well. Okay. I'm I'm just gonna put this out there with considering possibly moving this to just at the high school.
Oh, it would
Is
still be
that
available for 8th
Faith
grade,
grade, okay,
but do we need an additional, because they take
Okay.
it once.
yeah,
We do it once. And so we don't teach a health class in 7th grade, but in 8th grade, they take it and they take it in the high school level.
okay, so we're considering having one, like if you take it in 8th grade, maybe there's another one later.
So there's a couple of options that have to be explored, there's been no decision.
Okay,
But
these are all just
these are all
brainstorming.
just, what our educators or community that have brought it forward has spoken about over the last 2 years. And that is, one, to do it is to do a specific 7th grade health class. And then have the half credit option to still take it in 8th or at the high school level.
Okay.
The other thing that has been discussed is to have a middle school health and a high school health that, and different things have been thrown out about that high school, how to make it, when they're a little older, like, 10th grade on up. And we have been no decisions to go into brainstorming to see, and again, we have to filter out based on feedback and based on research, what is best. And so the team is really gonna work, the health educators are really gonna work on that intensely on the 14th of February, when, that's a professional day.
Okay. And you'll present how many kids are taking health in 8th grade versus the in high school and, yeah, I'd like to know.
I mean, I'm just gonna be real and speak from my kids' experience, but they all took it in 8th grade because they wanted high school to be able to take all the plethora of other options. So they were like, let's get that out of the way, so then I can do the stuff that I want to do.
So
Yeah,
I can.
And so, I mean, that's just something to consider. I'm guessing
That
that I'm not the only one to see that.
It is the majority that take it. That actually existed for my daughter. She wanted to have that schedule to take some additional elective courses
And I'm not saying that's good or bad, it's just, it's real life.
Well, that's also another option, like, is there an additional class that you could choose to take it?
Right.
Different from the one that I took.
Yeah, something more focused on people that plan on going into, medical sciences. Yeah.
So those are things we have to, figure out. And so we're going to work a lot on that on the 14th, and there will be some, things that staff do and we'll bring back for further discussion. We'll give an update in March, but also talk about the, human growth and development timeline at that time, and separating that out. I'll list it as 2 separate agenda items at that time, so that'll be more crisp.
Good, yeah, that's good. Clarity, because, yeah, sometimes people think they're talking about the same thing. And so we don't want it that confusion.
And that March 11th is another professional day that the team will have some good time to put together and work on that. So that's why I say an update at March 1, because, again, we need the time to investigate and look at what's best for kids. Okay.
I'm actually pretty excited about that. I like that, I mean, I'm a big health and wellness, it takes up a lot of my attention. I mean, getting older and, man, there are a lot of things, wish I would have started younger,
If I
So-
knew now what I knew.
And depending on how it's presented, there are, a lot of people are gonna go into that profession. And, just like our other electives that the kids are attracted to, this can be an attractive high school elective if it's done right.
Yep, correct. And that may be where we end up, is having an elective up there.
But I also like the 8th grade, like, for the kids that wanna make room for other electives. So I think both is gonna be what I anticipate, but I'll wait to hear what your feedback is.
Any questions on that? So, not only would you expect to see something on the March, but the April curriculum committee agenda as well. Okay, so, it will be a topic that we're going to well, thank you.
Anything else?
We noted your, ask for other topics at future curriculum committee meetings, like the social studies coming back and
Yeah,
things like that. So, March 1 is our next date.
Okay. All right, we will.
Also, I believe that social studies is on the agenda for Monday for the board meeting.
Okay.
So I believe
to,
I think it's posted, actually.
if it's not yet posted, we'll remove that from the agenda for Monday.
Okay, if it is posted, then we can maybe just speak to it and say we agree to look at more feedback, so we're gonna extend it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, we will adjourn then at 9:35.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.